gentle, curious connection.
Hi, everyone. This is Heather Vickery, and you've tuned in to the Brave Files podcast. I'm so excited that you've joined us, and you are in for a real treat today. Today, I chat with my friend and self-proclaimed super fan of the Brave Files podcast, Etai Nahary. Etai is a funny, engaging, passionate, heart-centered human. He's compassionate, kind, and he leads by example. He also has cerebral palsy. And while his CP has dictated a lot of his life, it hasn't stopped him from making his mark on the world and the people around him. Etai works to make the world a better place through understanding the people around him, and he even speaks up to 10 different languages simply so that he can communicate with as many people as possible. I don't know about you, but I think that's very cool. Though his thoughts sometimes get the best of him, Etai endeavors to never let his insecurities take over, at least not for very long. In this episode, we dig into understanding control and empowerment, especially when you are disabled. We talk about creating a mindset that is healthy but honest, and the importance of working to understand the people around you, because cultivating empathy will always get you farther than bitterness. We also talk about why you should always follow your passions, even when it seems difficult to do so, because living your truth will always create the best life possible. I'm thrilled to have Etai as a fan of the show, and I'm honored to call him a friend. But before we get started, I want to let you know something super exciting. My brand new book, Fuck Fearless, Making the Brave Leap, is going to be available for pre-order very soon. Details coming out hopefully within the next week. But if you want an advanced copy, I would like to give you one. Please consider joining my book launch team, The Brave Circle. It's open for anyone who's excited about the work I'm doing and wants to help me spread the word for how folks can live a bigger, bolder, braver, and more joy-filled life by implementing the Brave Method. Please visit vickeryandco.com/Brave Circle to see how you can support the book launch and me right now. Thanks in advance. All right, everyone, let's get started. This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show. Friends, you're in really for a treat today. Etai Nahary is insatiably curious. Just so happens I wrote that before I knew his 3 words. And he has a passion for serving and understanding others that is driven by another passion to be understood by the world around him. He has an impressive educational resume, which I will let him tell you about later. He speaks anywhere from 8 to 10 languages,
Depending on the day.
Born with cerebral palsy and confined to a wheelchair, Etai faces a very different world than most of us. But that doesn't stop him from living loud and wanting the world to be a better place for everyone in it, including himself. Etai started as a regular listener of the Brave Files podcast and turned into a friend. And I've invited him here today to talk about what choice and control means when you are disabled or differently abled. I have been waiting and waiting. Etai, welcome to the Brave Files.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm, as you say, I've been a groupie forever and ever and ever. And I think, the first time we talked or the first time I reached out to you, I said, I'm a bit starstruck. And I've been starstruck for a while. So if I tend to trip over my words, it's just that starstruck thing, and I'll do my best to ramble as little as possible. But it's a huge honor to be here.
I'm really honored that you feel that way because I'm a little bit starstruck by you. I think you are an absolutely incredible human being. And I just wanted to...
It takes one to know one, by the way.
Thank you. I wanted to let the listeners know that the invitation to have you join the show started because you and I engaged in some healthy discourse about some of the content that I was putting out. I talk a lot about folks having choice and control in their lives and how they can lean into their power and have power. And you pushed back a little bit in a way that I really loved. And we got to talking and got to clarifying. And I said, we have to take this to the show. So do you want to tell me your perspective on how we ended up here?
Yeah, before I start, as you said, I have CP. And what that means for me is that I have what they call spastic quadriplegic CP. And what that means is that I can get tight, and it can, and that tightness can sometimes affect my voice and the quality of my voice. And it might be difficult for me to get the words out sometimes. So if I can just ask the audience to be patient with me as I get through this, it's not anything other than just the CP acting as it does. And I never know when it's going to happen. So just, if you could be patient.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you. So how did we get here? I've been listening to so many of your episodes, and I've been a groupie for a while now, and you'll have to forgive me. I don't remember which episode it was, but it might have been in terms of somebody on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum.
I'll bet it was Kelly Gordon's episode.
It could have been, and again, my memory is not what it once was, but and she was talking, and you were talking about the amount of control that one has, and that we have more control than we often think we do. And as is often the case, I both agree and disagree.
I love that about you.
I agree, and I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. For any of you who know the Enneagram at all, 9s can see both sides of the argument, which often means that we can't make up our minds for shit. So we basically see both sides. So I agree in the sense that we often don't realize how much control we have because we're too close to ourselves and to our own situation. And that's why things like, therapy can help, and talking to others and having, a consensus reality check and so on. But also in the sense where I kind of came up against some resistance, shall we say, was, when you're physically disabled. And by the way, I don't like the term confined to a wheelchair. I prefer wheelchair user because actually the wheelchair, without the wheelchair, I wouldn't have the level of independence that I have. And confined to a wheelchair basically indicates that it's somewhere that I'm basically trapped in, and the chair does exactly the opposite.
It gives you your freedom. Thank you for that.
To the degree that it's possible.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the reason I bring it up is, as a wheelchair user and as someone who is disabled, and dependent on other people, there is by necessity a certain amount of control that I feel like I don't have in my life on a physical level. I depend on other people for assistance with activities of daily living, such as showering, such as toileting to one degree or another, depending on accessibility. And that's another topic, accessibility, that I can have dissertations about, forever and ever and ever. There are just, on the physical level, there are certain things that I, as a disabled person, and many other disabled people don't have control over. And so that's where I sort of ran into some resistance. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's what I shared with you. And
Yeah.
that's what sort of led to the invites for this episode.
I'm
So,
sure we would have gotten there anyway at some
yeah,
point, Etai, because I just love what you bring to the world. And we're probably going to have to do more than one episode
I
because
would
there's
be
so
honored.
much of you I want to share. Yeah. And so when you came to me with that, which I really appreciated, and I just want everyone to know, I believe that healthy discourse is really important. We need to be able to push back and ask questions and learn from and teach one another. This is how we evolve as a species. This is how we evolve globally. You know, when I talk about this, my catchphrase on it is change what you can and change your mindset about what you can't change, or control what you can and change your mindset about what you can't control. And that was what I came back to say to you. Of course, there are always, whether you are a differently abled person or not, there are always things that we can't control. But one thing we can control is our mindset about a situation.
And our reactions, and I
And our
agree.
reactions, yeah. And what I love about you, and I'm so glad, I'm a little embarrassed that I use the words confined to a wheelchair, but I appreciate you teaching me that that is not what I want to say, because it isn't the right answer. It isn't the right message.
Well, I don't know that it isn't, and again, it's not. It really depends on who you're talking to.
Right.
And when we say it's not, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit for me.
Fair enough.
It could very. I mean, I don't know many people who are disabled for whom it does fit. There could be people who are okay with that,
Sure.
with that phraseology. But I think, and this goes back to my facility with languages, and being able to connect and being able to kind of, connect through language. I think language and how we use it is tremendously important. And
Yeah,
the words that
I
we
agree.
that we choose are tremendously important. And all I can say is that for me, the experience, as I said before, is one of the wheelchair providing a level of independence that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely.
And so to say that it's confining
Yeah.
doesn't reflect my experience.
Well, and that is actually exactly to my point, which is why I circled back to it. That's a mindset shift. The words we use, of course, are so very important, because if you consider yourself harmed by the wheelchair versus aided by it, you're going to live a very different life.
Absolutely.
And so that's when I say change what you can and change your mindset about what you can't. We talk about control. That's really where I'm coming from. But I so value and appreciate how something like that could feel harmful to those who don't have nearly as much control in most of the areas of their life that able-bodied people have. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, how much of this is mindset? How much control do you feel like you have when you choose to think positive, use positive words, use things that feel better? Scientifically, we know that these things physiologically change our neuropathways and all of this and that. How much of that affects you?
It affects me tremendously, and I think it affects all of us tremendously. You say that it's all about, choosing the positive mindset and so on and so on. And I agree. And I just want to say that is on a moment-to-moment basis and on a day-to-day basis, for me, so much more of a challenge than one might imagine.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Because I do say that, but I know that it's not always easy.
I'm constantly engaged with it. And what I am aware of, and this is, through years of self-reflection and meditative practice and therapy on both sides. I'm one of my degrees is in counseling psychology, and I don't have a license, but that's part of another story. But I've been on therapy on both sides, and I've done a lot of reflection work and so on. But what I've become aware of is that there are so many, and I'm going to sound like a schizophrenic here. I don't mean to, but there are so many voices in my head that are constantly active,
Yeah.
and that I imagine that a lot of us have to navigate and deal with.
Everyone does. Maybe
Right.
not to the same scale or degree that you do, but everyone
Right,
does.
and
Yeah.
that's why I think it's and that's why I think it's a universal rather than a particular. That there are days where it's easier to deal with the voices and talk to them and replace them with I don't want to say positive, but at least neutral things, neutral statements. And then there are days when we talk about achievements and what feels brave on here all the time. There are moments, and it's literally a moment by moment thing. There are moments where it's an accomplishment, just to say, okay, the voices are here, or
Yes.
this is what's going on,
And that's brave
and
in those
that's
moments.
brave as you say, brave AF, right?
I did say that.
Which I love, by the way. And so it's just living is a challenge, and
Yeah.
it's an amazing adventure, but it's scary too. And I love Catherine North. She has this sentence that has been on one of my sticky notes on my computer. What is it that she says? Something like, "Fear is just practice being brave."
Fear is just practice being brave. From her book, Holy Heathen, which
Right.
I
Which
highly recommend.
Right, and I adore, and it's I mean, and so I live with, I would say, a healthy amount of hypervigilance, sometimes bordering on paranoia, and so I live with a whole slew of and those voices of fear and doubt are constantly there, and some of that is, I mean, a lot of it comes from how I was raised and my environment that I started in, and part of it, I think, comes from the energy in the culture that we find ourselves in, for better or worse. Most days these days, I struggle with that, but there are so many voices that we all have to navigate. And as I say, it's the times, it feels like the times where I can actually replace, call it the negative voices, with a positive affirmation, are few and far between. But I've gotten to the point, as I said before, where just realizing and showing up for the encounter
Yeah.
is
Just being in that moment and acknowledging and
is
being
yeah
aware.
is enough. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it's just that, and sometimes that's all we can do, and that's has to be enough in that moment.
It does. And we have to allow it to be acknowledged as brave action, everyday brave.
Yep.
Simply to do that. And the reason that we want that to be enough, that we want to acknowledge it, is because that alone creates a shift, right?
Absolutely.
For you, just to acknowledge that it's there and that you feel it and not deny it creates a shift.
Absolutely. And to
Yeah.
sit and sitting with it and just letting it be there, and saying, okay, you're here, I'm here. And this goes back to one of my words, and I think it's the first word I use, is gently, to be gentle. And what I try to remind myself is to be as gentle with myself as possible, because growing up, I feel like a lot of my environment, and the environment in which I grew up, was the opposite of gentle, and I internalized a lot of that. And I was going to say, I was going to say I used to, but I still, depending on the day, still beat myself up about that. And when I do, when I can remind myself to be gentle with it and just let it be there gently,
Yeah.
that's the achievement.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And everyone can take a page out of your book there, Etai, is to just show up for yourself gently and sit in your truth and in your space. So let's
And it doesn't always work, but that's the
it's the first step.
the quote unquote goal is just gentle.
Yeah.
Gentle.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. All right. So do me a favor and
Okay.
run down, because you have a really impressive, particularly educational resume. You're probably the single most educated person I've ever encountered.
Oh, dear
And I
God.
don't know that we could get fully into every bit of that in this one interview, but tell folks your background.
I'm laughing because it's a weird background. Well, I was born on Armistice Day of 1977. And anybody who knows what Armistice Day is gets bonus points. For those of you who don't know what Armistice Day is, I'll try Veterans Day in the United States.
Okay.
And for those of you who still don't know what that is, I will tell you that it's November 11th of 1977. I was born in Israel, and I was the first the firstborn of to my parents, and I was a firstborn male. And in Israel and in Judaism, which is the culture and the religion in which I was raised, that's a big deal. Because there are all kinds of expectations on the firstborn, and especially the firstborn male. The issue started when, at the age of 6 months, my parents realized that I wasn't hitting all those developmental milestones. And by that I mean I should have been able to at least hold my head up at the age of 6 months, sit up, and I wasn't hitting those milestones. And my parents started to take me to all kinds of specialists. And it took them about 18 months from specialist 1 to the final diagnosis of spastic quadriplegic CP to figure out that was the diagnosis. Now, in that process, my parents heard everything from, oh, he'll be fine, it's just it'll be a barely noticeable limp, and he'll be able to navigate the world just fine, and you won't notice it, to, and I kid you not, leave it in an institution and throw away the key.
Oh.
Okay? Leave it in an institution and throw away the key.
And it being you.
It being me, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm tremendously grateful and lucky that my parents advocated for me and saw whatever it is that they saw, intelligence, a spark of life, spark of universal consciousness, divine, what have you. And they said, no, we're not doing this. At the time, treatment in the United States for CP was better than almost anywhere in the world. We had family in the United States, and we got sponsored, and we ended up in New Haven, Connecticut. And so I was essentially, my schooling was in Connecticut. I then graduated Cheshire High School in 96. 96 to 2001, I went to the University of Connecticut. So first of all, I should say that I wanted to become a rabbi ever since I could remember. But for various reasons, and I don't know if we necessarily want to get into this because, again, it's a story and a half in and of itself.
We might have to have a whole episode dedicated to it. It is a really fascinating story,
right.
folks.
I mean,
we'll bring Etai back.
We'll do this at some other point. But rather than going to rabbinical school, I ended up at the University of Connecticut, where I basically had to make my own major, because there was a Judaic studies program, but it was in its infancy. I made a major of German Jewish history.
Which was the single hardest class I took in college, by the way. I took one class, and you have a degree in it.
And I had to make it. So yeah, I created an individualized major of German Jewish history, and then because I felt safe there after 5 years of undergrad, I decided, okay, I'm going to do a master's in comparative literature, and I decided to study post-Holocaust literature, essentially because I wanted to understand. My father's side of the family are German Jews, and a lot of them had the and my great grandfather decided after the war to come back to Germany and live out the rest of his life there. And my grandfather and
wow,
and my grandmother and my father grew up in Germany, and so, and it always sort of, I'd always been, fascinated, and I wanted to understand, again, insatiably curious, how is it that German Jews, particularly who were targeted, felt more German than Jewish. In other words, German enough to want to come back and live out their life,
absolutely
live out their life. Now, I don't know. So I ended up doing this through a study of post-Holocaust literature and trying to understand it. I don't know that I managed to. I don't know that I have a will. That's one of the psychological puzzles that exist in the world. And at the end of the master's in 2001, I had a group of friends who had been listening to me essentially prattle on about becoming a rabbi for a very long time, and who said basically, I'm going to use a phrase that my mother likes to use, is shit or get off the pot.
I've said that on occasion.
There's they said, apply and see what happens. So I applied, and a program out in California accepted me provisionally. And so I went out, I on my own basically went out there.
Yeah.
Went out there to try and do this.
How does that happen? Let me just insert this question.
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know how you did it?
A lot of, I have no idea. I work very intuitively in my life. And I have as much control as I would like to have, and I try to have. Life has taught me that they're really, from my perspective, and I think this is why I kept, coming up against what you were saying in the episode that led to this discussion. In my experience, there is far less control than we think.
And yet you went to California on your own as a human who needs a lot of extra support physically.
Yeah, and I was, and there's a thin line between, again, and I'm not sure where that ended up being, but I've always understood that there's a thin line between being very brave and very stupid. and
well, you're still here, so you couldn't have been that stupid.
And because I survived it, I guess I was very brave.
Oh, that's
again.
Funny.
And so I tried to do this. Now, this is a really interesting. This is something very, very, very important. What happened on the first day of the rabbinical school orientation? The dean of the school basically told us, the group of us who were coming in, okay, you found your life calling. Now your job is to go and find a life partner. Because apparently clergy need life partners in order to exist in the universe. And we can go on and on.
And I'm pretty sure you're being sarcastic as you say that.
We can go on and on.
Unless you're a Catholic priest, and then you're not allowed to have one.
We can go on and on about organized religion, and those those are 5 episodes, so I'll do my best to just. Let's just say that Heather, you and I are agree on organized religion. I mean, it's yeah.
Are you still a practicing Jew?
It depends who you ask. There are parts of me, because it's so deep inside
Well, it's so
me,
much
because,
a culture.
right?
Jewish
Because
culture.
of that's how I was raised. There are ways that I can't get it out of my system, but do I do it publicly? No, I haven't done it publicly for a very long time.
Okay.
So essentially what happened was, you know, they knew I was disabled. They took me anyway for some strange reason. And I say for some strange reason because they really did everything that they could to kick me out of there, because I didn't fit inside their box. You know, seminaries' jobs are to create clergy that fit the organizations that they mean to serve, and I've never fit in anybody's frickin' box. So they really did everything that they could to kick me out of there.
It's such their loss.
Well, and you're very sweet to say that, and I appreciate it. But you know, and the way they did it was to say that. So I went and I found my future wife, and I found her on eHarmony, and she was in Alaska at the time. So we developed a friendship and a relationship, and she, when I met her, was in the process of converting to Judaism. Now, there were several other people in my class who were in the same situation, who were dating seriously partners who were also in the process of converting. But what they did with me was they said, look, remember that I was accepted on a provisional basis, okay? And they said to me, we'll accept you on a permanent basis. The main condition was you basically break up with your fiance at this time, my future wife. And so they put me in front of a choice. They either said, you know, your future life partner or the rabbinate. And I essentially told them to go, can I say this?
You can.
I basically told them to go fuck themselves. And I chose my wife. And we went, we found our way from, she was in Los Angeles at this point. We found our way up to the Bay Area, where I stayed with a friend, we stayed with a friend of mine that I met at UConn, and I spent some time going back and forth trying to write film scripts, which was another interesting piece. But I eventually found what was then the John F. Kennedy University School of Holistic Studies, where I went for my second master's in counseling psychology with a focus on transpersonal psychology. And the idea was to get licensed in California as a marriage and family therapist. Again, long frickin' story, but I feel like everything is so connected, and that's why I tend to ramble so much. But that for accessibility reasons, it didn't work. And so, you know, many moons later, we found our way to South Dakota, another story, which is where we are now. And basically, I have all these skills, but I don't have a license. And then pandemic happened, and is still happening. And I said to myself, with a number of other, people who've been talking to me about this, they said to me, why don't you somehow use all these skills that you have and become a use it, but call it a life coach, because that's not as regulated as as therapy is. And I said, you know what, that's a good idea. I basically, I'm not going to lose anything, because I've never been able to hold down a job, despite being as educated as I am.
They can't take your knowledge away, though, no matter how much they try.
Right, because of accessibility and so on. Another topic. But so I basically said, you know what, I'm gonna try this. And so various incarnations later, now we have Etai's Corner, which is sort of my project, which the goal is to make into a profitable business. And I'm working from home and trying to do this from my computer. And so Etai's Corner is basically my labor of love, in which I'm essentially, trying to demystify disability. And this interview, I'm hoping, will help that happen in some way, shape, or form a little bit. And also to connect with people, around the world and help them, connect and communicate better. The one thing we didn't talk about yet, and that's another part of it. You mentioned my 8 to 10 languages.
I know. Because people are like, wait, do you know 8 or do you know 10? And I love your perspective on that. I mean, I know 1. I'm just...
Okay. And again, it depends on the day, because it depends how tired I am, and it depends if I can pull the words out of the vocabulary, out of the CPU that is my brain, and so forth and so on. But so I was always one of the positive things that have been implanted in my head that I love and that I will always be grateful for, was this just belief that I am essentially a language genius. My parents said it, and everybody around me said it. So being born, let's go through the list, because it's fun. The list is, I believe this is English I'm speaking, right?
I think so.
This is English. Okay. I think this is English. So, but my mother tongue is Hebrew. I was educated in English. I began in junior high school to study French, also German, which I've been keeping up. And so basically there are 3 tiers. I have English, Hebrew, and German I find nearly fluent. French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese are, I would say, the intermediate level right now. And I'm at something like a beginner level in Polish. And I recently started playing with Greek for the hell of it.
What is it about languages for you?
They're fun.
Okay.
They're
and
fun.
You can, clearly.
And I can, and it's finding connections between words and listen and similarities between words, and it's being able to connect, and it's being able to. Language is our culture, and language is mentality. So when you understand a language, and you can speak to somebody in their own language, and I think Mandela said something to the effect of, if you speak to a person in their own language, then you've reached their heart, and that's only part of the quote. But I
love that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's just, languages are fun, and it's a game, and languages are my happy space.
Yeah.
So what I'm attempting to do is to take the disability awareness and the disability education and the languages, and somehow marry those two together. So that in a very compacted and hopefully short discussion, and I realize we're about 40 minutes here, is essentially my background.
Yeah. So, but you're using all of those skills now. Your organization is called Etai's Corner.
It is a business.
Okay.
It has a sales It has a sales tax number, et
There
cetera,
you
et cetera.
go.
So it is a business.
We're
And
celebrating that.
yes. And the other thing that I wanna celebrate is that it took the Facebook page was originally came into being on July 31st of last year, and on July 15th of this year was the first time that Etai's Corner got paid. I did a workshop on communication for a domestic violence shelter in New York that serves particularly disabled people.
I love that.
And they were.
So how did you celebrate? Let's talk about that. How do you like to celebrate?
We basically there was a lot of music, and there was a lot of cheering, and there was a lot of oh my God, I did this, and it's still something that I'm celebrating. Even talking about this now is celebrating it, and there's still a part of me that doesn't quite believe that it happened, because I've never been able to hold down a job or make any kind of money. So it's an amazing thing. And the shelter said that they were impressed enough with me that they're looking to schedule another training.
That's wonderful.
Like this. And so Etai's Corner is starting to generate profit, which is amazing.
It's wonderful.
And it's and like I said, I'm looking for ways to make it so that the disability and the language space sort of find each other, and so that I end up doing this from my happy space.
Yeah, I love that. Very quickly, Etai, what would the topics be that folks could invite you to come and speak to their organization and pay you for your time?
Basically, disability awareness, which is essentially part of what we're doing here. A lot of what you'll hear, again, it depends on the particular needs of the organization. But disability and communication, how to communicate about disability, how to communicate authentically with people, how to authentically connect, how to be gentle with oneself. Again, all of the topics that we've touched upon here, the importance of using language, the importance of mindset, the importance of, just showing up and being there with one's own voices. And I don't mean that in a schizophrenic sense in any way, shape, or form. But, but things like this. And, and that's sort of where my passions sit. And I have a YouTube channel, Etai's Corner, where I do a lot of videos around stuff like this, where I've had discussions with people about disability, and a lot of the same things that we've talked about here. We talk about in conversation on the YouTube channel and so on.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, y'all want to go and check out all of Etai's stuff. Most of the stuff that Etai puts out is video or audio, because typing is challenging for you, right, Etai?
Yeah, and that's why when we communicate, you and I, when we communicate, we often communicate through voice messages. And so this is really has been a wonderful extension of that process.
Absolutely.
For
I
me,
love that.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, I think we've clearly established that there's lots more that we could talk about. I really appreciate, though, you coming in and sharing this perspective. It's really a lot for all of us to think about, and how can we bring this into our lives and our hearts in ways that bring people together instead of add more division, which is the last thing we need.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite charitable organization to support?
Well, there are so many, but I actually decided to highlight at this point the ASPCA, because my wife and I have made it a practice whenever possible to adopt animals that are sort of our speed physically. By that I mean older animals that need a little bit more care and homes and just a little bit more love. And we've always done that through the ASPCA. And we currently have our kitty Toby that we got from there, who's just been a real blessing to our lives. So anything that anyone can do to support the ASPCA, that's what I'd like to highlight. If
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. We'll make them our charity of the week, and you all know what to do. Go out and give them love in whatever way you can. Etai, share your 3 words with us one last time.
What did I say they were? They're gentle and curious connection. Absolutely.
I think those are beautiful words for you. They describe you to me very clearly, and my world is better because you're in it. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Well, listeners, I don't know about you, but I learned a lot from this conversation, and I'm always thrilled when we can engage in important dialogue after you've listened to an episode. The world is so wide, my friends. And when you see from only your perspective and only your own lived experiences, you're stuck in just a tiny fraction of what's actually out there. It is so brave to have honest conversations, ask honest questions, push back when needed, and be open-minded to what you might discover. I want to thank you for being here with us today and invite you to share what you think, what you're feeling, how you're out choosing bravely. You can send me an email at heather@vickeryandco.com or DM me on Instagram or Twitter, which is what Etai did. You'll find me at both places at Vickery & Co.
He does respond, folks.
I do. I really do. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. This is Heather Vickery reminding you today and every day to go out and choose bravely. Hey friends, I want to share something really exciting with you. We already know you enjoy listening to podcasts because you're listening to this one, but I'm also betting you enjoy audiobooks. And hey, listen, if you don't already enjoy audiobooks, then it's time to check them out. That's why I'm really excited to share Libro.fm with you. They are an incredible new platform for listening to audiobooks. And by choosing Libro.fm over other audiobook services, you are supporting a local bookstore of your choice and investing in your local community. Libro.fm offers over 150,000 audiobooks via their primary platform, which, by the way, they built with love and from scratch because they're a small business also. They even offer bookseller recommendations for great audiobook options. You can sign up right now via www.vickeryandco.com/LibroFM. That's vickeryandco.com/LIBROFM. And when you do, you'll get one free audiobook of your choice, and the proceeds will go to your favorite local bookstore. Now, check what I just said there. You're going to get a free book, and the proceeds are still going to go to your local bookstore because Libro.fm makes sure that their booksellers get paid even when they give a promo to customers. I've listened to over 20 audiobooks this year alone. I especially love listening to memoirs read by the author, and it feels great knowing that all of my purchases support my local bookstore, The Book Table, in Oak Park, Illinois. Libro.fm. The same audiobooks, the same price, but a completely different story. Check them out right now at vickeryandco.com/LibroFM. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Maybe you've had this thought and then quickly shut it down because who has the time? Or you don't know how, or gosh, it just all seems too hard. If you have something to share with the world, we want to encourage you to get your message out. The world needs to hear it. Did you know that 50% of all homes are podcast fans? If you've ever wondered about having your own podcast or how it can increase your business or get your message across, then please join me and the other experts from the Podcast Power Academy for our monthly free Q&A session. It's called So You Want to Start a Podcast? This casual live conversation will help you understand how podcasting can be a great decision, why now is the best time to get started, and how to get into action with it. Visit podcastpoweracademy.com to learn more. You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories of people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes and full episode transcripts, or to get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we would love to know what you think of the show. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching. Coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music was created and produced in a custom collaboration with Matt Lewis from ML Creative Consulting, a boutique firm dedicated to helping clients identify their unique sound and amplify their brand with custom delivered soundtracks. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to everyone on Team Brave, from our producers, associate producers, copy editors, writers, and support team. Special thanks to Molly, Mary, Kim, Sabra, and Sabrina. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.